The waterfall roared behind her like a living thing, drowning out everything except the sobs that tore from Seraphine's chest. She pressed her back against the slick stone wall of the hidden cavern, her knees drawn up to her chin, her pale arms wrapped around herself as though she might shatter into 1,000 pieces if she let go. Foolish, she whispered to herself between ragged breaths. So foolish to believe it would be different this time. The mating ceremony had been set for sunset. Seraphine had spent 3 days preparing, 3 days of hope blooming in her chest like the first flowers of spring. Calum had chosen her. He had looked into her silver-gray eyes and spoken the words of intention before the entire pack. For once, for the first time in her 23 years, someone had seen Pat, her sister's golden beauty, and chosen the quiet Omega with the strange eyes. And then Evangeline had smiled. That smile. Seraphine knew it better than she knew her own reflection. The slight curve of lips, the predatory gleam in those amber eyes that everyone else mistook for warmth. Evangeline had worn that smile when she stole Seraphine's first suitor at 16, again at 19 when a kind beta from the neighboring territory had shown interest, and now, at the ceremony that should have bound Seraphine to her fated mate, Evangeline had worn it once more. Sister, Evangeline had purred, stepping between Seraphine and Calum with liquid grace. Surely you understand. Some wolves are simply meant for greater things. Seraphine had watched Calum's eyes glaze over, watched his nostrils flare as he caught whatever intoxicating scent Evangeline was releasing, watched him turn away from his intended mate as though Seraphine had never existed at all. The pack had laughed. Some had pitied. Most had simply looked away, embarrassed by the spectacle of the unwanted Omega being cast aside yet again. So Seraphine had run. She fled through the forest until her lungs burned, until the sounds of celebration faded behind her, until she found herself at the ancient waterfall that marked the boundary between pack territories. The cavern behind the cascading water had always been her secret refuge, the one place where no one ever thought to look for her. Now, as the evening light filtered through the curtain of water in fractured rainbows, Seraphine finally let herself break. Why? The word escaped her like a wounded animal. Why am I never enough? She pressed her forehead to her knees, her dark hair falling around her like a shroud. The waterfall drowned out the world, but it could not drown the voice in her head that whispered she would always be second, always overlooked, always the shadow to her sister's blazing sun. The scent reached her before the sound did. Cedar and winter frost, and something deeper. Something that made every nerve in her body sing with sudden awareness. Seraphine's head snapped up, her silver eyes widening as a massive shadow moved through the waterfall. A man emerged from the cascade, water streaming from shoulders, broad enough to block out the fading light. He was impossibly tall, his dark hair plastered to a face carved from granite and moonlight. But it was his eyes that stole her breath-deep gold, burning like captured sunlight, fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf stir for the first time in years. "Who are you?" Seraphine breathed, scrambling backward against the stone. "This is pack territory. You cannot be here." The stranger did not answer. He stood frozen in the shallow pool at the cavern's entrance, his chest heaving as though he had been running for miles. His golden gaze swept over her tear-stained face, her trembling form, the ceremonial dress now soaked and ruined. Something shifted in his expression, something raw and fierce that made her heart stutter. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, carrying an authority that made her wolf want to bare its throat in submission. "Mate." The single word echoed off the cavern walls, and Seraphine felt her world tilt on its axis. No. The word left Seraphine's lips before she could stop it, sharp with disbelief. No, that cannot be. She pressed herself harder against the stone wall, her heart hammering so violently she was certain he could hear it. The stranger, this intruder, remained motionless at the cavern's edge, water still dripping from his jaw, his golden eyes never leaving her face. "You feel it," he said. It was not a question. His voice rolled through the space between them like distant thunder. "The pull. The recognition. Your wolf knows." Seraphine shook her head violently, but even as she denied it, something deep within her stirred. Her wolf, the quiet, dormant creature that had barely surfaced since she presented as an Omega at 13, was suddenly awake, alert, straining toward this stranger with desperate hunger. "I do not know you," she managed, "and I have already been claimed tonight. Or did you not notice the ceremonial dress?" The stranger's jaw tightened. "You wear the dress, yet you weep alone behind a waterfall. You have been claimed by no one." The accuracy of his observation cut deeper than any blade. Seraphine's chin lifted, a spark of defiance flickering through her grief. "What happens in my pack is none of your concern. You are trespassing on sovereign territory. If our Alpha discovers you here, Your alpha, the stranger interrupted, a dangerous edge entering his tone, would do well to explain why I have found my mate crying in a hidden cave, wearing another male's ceremonial colors. My mate, there it was again. The words sent a shiver racing down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Who are you? Seraphine whispered. The stranger stepped forward, and the last rays of evening light caught his features fully for the first time. High cheekbones, a strong nose, lips that looked carved from determination itself. A thin scar traced from his left temple to his jaw, the mark of someone who had known battle. But it was the way he carried himself that made her breath catch. This was not merely a warrior. This was someone accustomed to command. My name is Kalen Voss, he said quietly, Alpha King of the Northern Realm. The cavern seemed to contract around her. Seraphine's vision swam. The Northern Realm, the vast territory that stretched from the frozen mountains to the shadow forests, encompassing 12 packs under a single rule. The Alpha King whose name was spoken in whispers, whose power was said to rival the ancient wolves of legend. That cannot be, she breathed. The Alpha King is a myth. A story told to frighten pups into obedience. Something, almost like amusement, flickered across his hard features. I assure you, little Omega, I am very real. He took another step forward, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his massive frame, and very much standing before my mate. Seraphine's wolf whimpered inside her chest, not in fear, but in recognition, in longing. The sensation was so foreign, so overwhelming, that tears pricked her eyes again. You have made a mistake, she said, her voice cracking. I am no one. A worthless Omega from a small pack. My own intended chose my sister over me, not 3 hours past. You cannot possibly tell me his name. The quiet fury in those 3 words silenced her. Kalan's eyes had darkened to molten amber, and the air around him seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. Tell me the name of the male who dared reject what is mine. I am not yours. Seraphine protested weakly, but even as she spoke, her wolf howled in disagreement. I do not even know you. Kalan closed the remaining distance between them in a single stride. He did not touch her. Something held him back, some thread of restraint that seemed to cost him dearly, but he lowered himself until his face was level with hers, until she could see the flecks of bronze in those striking eyes. You eyes, he murmured, and his voice had lost its sharp edge, becoming something almost reverent. They called them cursed, did they not? Different, wrong. Seraphine flinched. Her silver-gray eyes, the mark that had set her apart since birth, that had made the pack whisper of ill omens and tainted blood. I have searched 300 years for eyes like yours, Kalan said softly. Eyes that match the prophecy. Eyes that mark the true Luna of the Northern Realm. Before Seraphine could process his words, a howl split the night close, hunting, furious. Then another, and another. Kalan's head snapped toward the waterfall, his body shifting to place himself between her and the entrance. They are coming for you, he said flatly. My pack, Seraphine realized with growing dread. They must have noticed I fled. My father will not touch you. The Alpha King's voice had turned to steel. Not while I draw breath. He turned back to her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart clench. Not possession or demand, but a question, a choice. Come with me, Kalan said. Let me take you somewhere safe. Somewhere you will never be made to feel worthless again. The howls were growing closer. Seraphine could hear voices now, her father's thunderous roar, Evangeline, sharp commands, the baying of wolves who had never once defended her. She looked at the stranger before her, this Alpha King who spoke of prophecy, and called her his mate, and knew she stood at the edge of an abyss. Why should I trust you? She whispered. Kalan extended his hand, palm up, in the ancient gesture of offering. Because I will spend every moment proving that you should. Outside, shadows moved through the trees. Her old life waited to drag her back into its suffocating embrace. Seraphine placed her trembling hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, heat flooded through Seraphine's veins like liquid fire. She gasped, her knees buckling, and would have fallen if Kalan had not caught her against his chest. The bond, he murmured against her hair. It recognizes what your mind has not yet accepted. Before she could respond, he swept her into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. Hold your breath. What? They plunged through the waterfall. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing whatever breath she had managed to hold. But Kalan's arms remained steady around her, his body shielding her from the worst of the cascade's force. When they emerged on the other side, the forest stretched before them in shades of silver and shadow. There, a voice rang out through the trees, Evangeline's voice, sharp with triumph. I see them. Kaelin set Seraphine on her feet but kept one hand firmly clasped around hers. Can you run? Yes. I think so. Then run. They tore through the underbrush together, branches whipping at Seraphine's face and arms. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew snarls and howls and the heavy thud of paws on forest floor. Her pack was hunting her. The realization should have terrified her, but with Kaelin's hand wrapped around hers, with his steady presence beside her, she felt something she had not felt in years. Alive. They burst into a moonlit clearing, and Seraphine stumbled to a halt, her lungs burning. At the far edge of the open ground, a dozen wolves waited in perfect formation, massive creatures with coats of midnight black and winter white, their eyes gleaming with intelligence that marked them as shifters. My guard, Kaelin said. They will escort us to the border. Seraphine. She spun at her father's roar. Alpha Hendrik Ashford emerged from the tree line in human form, his face twisted with rage. Behind him came Evangeline, still beautiful despite the exertion of the chase, and Caleb, the male who was supposed to be Seraphine's mate, now watching the scene with glazed confusion. You dare? Hendrik snarled, his eyes fixed on Kaelin. You dare touch my daughter? Your daughter, Kaelin replied, his voice dangerously soft. Whom you allowed to be humiliated before her entire pack. Your daughter, whom you raised to believe she was worthless. Your daughter, who is my fated mate. The clearing went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Impossible, Evangeline breathed, and for the first time, fear flickered in her amber eyes. She cannot be mated to. You are the Alpha King. I am. Kaelin's golden gaze swept over Evangeline with cold dismissal. And you are the sister who has stolen from her time and again. Yes. I can smell it on you, the artificial pheromones, the manipulation. Did you think such tricks would work on me? Evangeline's face drained of color. I do not know what you... Silence. The single word carried the weight of absolute authority. Evangeline's mouth snapped shut against her will, her eyes widening in shock. Beside her, Caleb shook his head as though emerging from a fog, confusion and dawning horror spreading across his features. Seraphine. Caleb whispered, looking at her as though seeing her for the first time. What? What happened? Why am I? You were manipulated, Kaelin said flatly. Your intended has been using forbidden arts to cloud the minds of males. This one is not the first she has stolen from your sister. That is a lie, Hendrik bellowed, stepping forward. Evangeline would ne'er. Would she not? Kaelin's voice dropped to something almost gentle as he looked at Seraphine. How many times, little one? How many males has she taken from you? Seraphine's throat tightened. The years of pain, of watching potential mates turn away from her mid-sentence as soon as Evangeline entered the room, of being told she was not trying hard enough, that something must be wrong with her. 3, she whispered. 3 before Caleb. A low growl rumbled from Kaelin's chest. 3. And your pack did nothing, your father did nothing. She lies. Evangeline screamed, her composure finally cracking. She has always been jealous of me. This is her revenge, seducing the Alpha King with her pathetic tears. Enough. Kaelin raised one hand, and the wolves of his guard rose as one. Seraphine is leaving with me. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. Any attempt to stop us will be considered an act of war against the Northern Realm. The blood drained from Hendrik's face. War with the Northern Realm would mean annihilation. Everyone present knew it. You cannot simply take her, Evangeline hissed, desperation making her reckless. She belongs to this pack. Kaelin turned to Seraphine, and his hard features softened almost imperceptibly. Do you wish to stay? Seraphine looked at her father, who had never once defended her. At Evangeline, whose beautiful face was twisted with hatred. At Caleb, who still seemed lost in confusion. No, she said quietly. There is nothing for me here. Then we go. Kaelin swept her into his arms once more, and before anyone could move, he was running, faster than any wolf she had ever seen, his guard flanking them in perfect formation. The last thing Seraphine heard was Evangeline's scream of fury, echoing through the trees like the cry of a wounded beast. This is not over, sister. Do you hear me? This is not over. But the wind swallowed the words, and Seraphine closed her eyes, pressing her face against Kaelin's chest as he carried her toward a future she could not yet imagine. They traveled through the night, stopping only when the first gray light of dawn began to bleed across the horizon. By then, Seraphine's body had surrendered to exhaustion, and she drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Kaelin's steady heartbeat beneath her ear and the warmth of his arms around her. When she finally woke fully, she found herself in a bed softer than clouds, beneath blankets that smelled of pine and winter roses. The room around her was carved from dark stone, but great windows let in streams of pale sunlight, and a fire crackled in a hearth large enough to stand in. "You are awake." Seraphine turned her head to find an elderly woman seated beside the bed, her white hair braided with silver beads, her weathered face kind. The woman rose and pressed a warm cup into Seraphine's hands. "Drink," she commanded gently. "Honey and herbs for strength. You have been through much. Where am I?" Seraphine managed, her voice rough from disuse. "Thornhaven Castle, heart of the northern realm. I am Isolde, keeper of the king's household." The woman's dark eyes twinkled. "And you, child, have caused quite a stir." Seraphine's cheeks flushed. "I did not mean to cause trouble. The King Kaelan, he found me, and I—" "Hush." Isolde patted her hand. "There is no trouble, only joy. We have waited 3 centuries for you." 3 centuries? Seraphine frowned. Kaelan said something similar about searching for, but that cannot be literal. No wolf lives 300 years. Isolde's expression grew serious. "No ordinary wolf, child. But the Alpha King is not ordinary. None of his bloodline are." She hesitated, then seemed to reach a decision. "There is much you do not know about the world you have entered, but such explanations should come from him, not me." As if summoned by her words, the chamber door opened. Kaelan entered, and Seraphine felt her breath catch all over again. In the morning light, stripped of the drama of their first meeting, he was somehow even more striking. He had changed into clothes of deep charcoal that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, and his dark hair was still damp from bathing. "Leave us," he said to Isolde, though his eyes never left Seraphine's face. The old woman bowed and departed, closing the door softly behind her. In the silence that followed, Seraphine was acutely aware of her own disheveled state, her hair tangled, her ceremonial dress replaced by a simple sleeping gown she did not remember putting on. "How do you feel?" Kaelan asked, stopping at the foot of the bed, though uncertain of his welcome. "Confused," Seraphine admitted. "Frightened, overwhelmed." She paused. "But also safe. Which makes no sense, because I do not know you at all." "The bond," Kaelan said quietly. "It creates a sense of security between mates. Your wolf recognizes me even if your mind does not." "About that," Seraphine set down her cup and met his golden gaze. "You keep calling me your mate, but I have never felt the pull before, not with Kaelan, not with anyone. My wolf has been silent since I was 13. I thought perhaps I was broken." Something flickered across Kaelan's features, understanding, perhaps, or sorrow. "You were not broken. You were waiting." He moved closer, lowering himself into the chair Isolde had vacated. "May I tell you a story?" Seraphine nodded slowly. 300 years ago, Kaelan began. There was a prophecy spoken by the last of the moon seers. She foretold that the Alpha bloodline would face extinction, a curse laid upon us by an enemy we never saw coming. One by one, the females of my family died without bearing heirs. My mother, my sisters, my aunts, gone. His voice remained steady, but Seraphine could see the ancient pain in his eyes. The curse was specific, he continued. No female born of wolf blood could carry a child of the Alpha line. The only hope was a mate marked by moonsilver eyes, a sign that the curse had no hold over her spirit. "Moonsilver," Seraphine whispered, her hand rising unconsciously to touch the corner of her eye. "Your eyes," Kaelan confirmed. "The same shade that appeared in the seer's vision. I have searched every pack, every territory, and every corner of the realm for 3 centuries, and I found you crying behind a waterfall, believing yourself worthless." Seraphine's throat tightened. "So you need me for breeding, to break a curse?" "No." The word was fierce, immediate. Kaelan leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of the chair, as though restraining himself from reaching for her. "I need nothing from you that you do not freely give. The curse is my burden, not yours. If you wish to leave, I will ensure your safety anywhere in the realm. But I found you, Seraphine, and the bond is real. Whatever happens from this moment forward is your choice." She studied him in silence, searching for deception and finding none. This male, this king, was offering her something she had never been given before. "A choice. If I stay," she said carefully, "what happens? You learn who you truly are. You discover why your wolf has been silent, why your eyes mock you as different, why you survived years of your sister's manipulation when others would have broken." Kaelan's gaze softened. "And perhaps, in time, you allow me to court you properly." Despite everything, a small smile tugged at Seraphine's lips. "Court me? You are the Alpha King. You could simply command." "I could," he agreed, and something warm flickered in those golden depths. but I would rather earn what I could take. You deserve that much, little one. Before Seraphine could respond, pain lanced through her skull, blinding and incomprehensible. She cried out, clutching her temples as images flooded her mind. Fire and shadow. A figure wreathed in darkness. Evangeline's face twisted into something inhuman, and above it all, a voice like poisoned honey. Did you think you could escape me, little sister? Seraphine. Kaelin's voice cut through the agony, his hands suddenly on her shoulders, steadying her. What is it? What do you see? But she could not answer. The vision held her in its grip, and through the flames and shadow, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Evangeline, standing over Kaelin's body, a silver blade buried in his chest, and her sister's triumphant smile as she whispered, "The Alpha King falls, and his precious mate will watch." The vision released her as suddenly as it had struck. Seraphine collapsed against the pillows, gasping, and her silver eyes wide with terror. "She is coming," she breathed. "My sister, she is coming to kill you." Kaelin's expression did not change, but his eyes had turned to molten steel. "Then she will learn," he said quietly. "What happens to those who threaten what is mine?" The days that followed blurred together in a haze of discovery and wonder. Thornhaven Castle was nothing like the modest pack house where Seraphine had spent her entire life. Corridors stretched endlessly, carved from obsidian stone that seemed to drink in the torchlight. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung from walls 3 stories high. And everywhere she walked, wolves bowed their heads in deference to her. "They know who you are," Isolde explained on the 3rd morning, guiding Seraphine through the castle gardens. "Word spreads quickly in the northern realm. The Alpha King has found his mate at last." "But I have done nothing to earn their respect," Seraphine protested. "I am still the same Omega, who could not even keep a mate in her own pack." Isolde stopped walking and turned to face her with surprising intensity. "You are not the same. You never were what they told you. The curse that silenced your wolf, the manipulation that stole your suitors, none of it was your failing. You survived what would have destroyed others." "What do you mean, the curse that silenced my wolf?" The old woman hesitated, glancing toward the castle as though seeking permission. "That is not my tale to tell. But know this, child, your wolf is not silent. She is waiting. And when she finally wakes," Isolde's eyes glittered with something like anticipation, "the realm will tremble." Before Seraphine could press further, a familiar scent reached her cedar and winter frost, and her heart stuttered traitorously in her chest. She turned to find Kaelin approaching across the frost-touched gardens, his dark cloak billowing behind him. He had kept his distance since revealing the prophecy. Respectful. Patient. Maddening. Every morning, he sent flowers to her chamber, winter roses that bloomed only in the northern realm. Every evening, he dined with her in the great hall, asking about her day, her thoughts, her dreams, never once pressing for more than she offered. It was driving her slowly insane. "Walk with me?" Kaelin offered his arm in the formal manner of old. "There is something I wish to show you." Seraphine hesitated only a moment before accepting. The contact sent warmth spiraling through her veins, and she wondered if she would ever grow accustomed to the effect he had on her. He led her through winding paths she had not yet explored, past fountains that somehow flowed, despite the winter chill, until they reached a secluded grove at the garden's heart. At its center stood an ancient tree, its bark silver-white, its branches reaching toward the sky like supplicating arms. "The Moon-Whisper Tree," Kaelin said quietly. "Planted by the first alpha of my line over 1,000 years ago. It is said that the tree reflects the truth of those who stand beneath it." Seraphine approached slowly, drawn by something she could not name. The bark seemed to pulse with inner light, and as she reached out to touch it, a jolt of energy raced up her arm. Images flooded her mind, not the dark visions of her sister, but something older, deeper. She saw a woman with silver eyes standing before a great assembly of wolves. She saw moonlight pooling in cupped hands like liquid silver. She saw herself, but not as she was transformed, powerful, radiant with inner fire. "What was that?" she gasped, pulling her hand back. Kaelin's expression was unreadable. "The tree showed you something. What did you see?" "Myself," she whispered. "But different. Stronger. And there was a woman who looked like me, standing before hundreds of wolves." "The first Luna," Kaelin said, and his voice held a note of wonder. "The original bearer of moon silver eyes. She was not merely a mate to the Alpha King of her time, she was his equal in every way. A healer, a seer, a warrior when necessity demanded." He turned to face Seraphine fully. "Her bloodline was thought to have died out centuries ago. Until you. You think I am descended from her? I do not think. I know." Kaelin stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "The tree does not lie, Seraphine. Whatever your pack told you, whatever your sister made you believe, you are not worthless. You are not weak. You carry the blood of the most powerful Luna who ever lived. Tears pricked at her eyes. Then why? Why was my wolf silenced? Why could I never feel the bond with anyone before you? Because you were waiting for me, he said simply. And I for you. The curse that struck my bloodline, it was designed to prevent exactly this union. Someone knew what would happen if the Alpha King and the Moon Silver Luna ever found each other. Before he could say more, a horn sounded in the distance, 3 sharp blasts that echoed across the castle grounds. Kaelin's entire demeanor transformed, the tender suitor replaced by the Alpha King in an instant. Intruders at the border, he said grimly. Stay here. Do not leave the castle grounds. Kaelin, he cupped her face in his hands, the gesture so sudden and intimate that her breath caught. Promise me, he demanded, whatever happens, whatever you hear, you will not leave these walls. The intensity in his gaze made her wolf stir with something like fear, not of him but for him. I promise, she whispered. He released her and was gone, shifting mid-stride into a massive black wolf that tore across the gardens toward the distant sounds of chaos. Seraphine stood alone beneath the Moon Whisper tree, her heart pounding, her newly awakened senses straining toward the horizon, and carried on the wind, faint but unmistakable, she heard a laugh she knew better than her own heartbeat. Evangeline had found her. The battle at the border raged for hours. Seraphine paced her chamber like a caged animal, every nerve in her body screaming to go to Kaelin, to help him, to stand beside him against whatever threat had come. But she had promised, and despite the terror clawing at her chest, she would not break her word. Isolde brought news in fragments. A rogue pack had attacked the northern border. Dozens of wolves, led by someone whose identity remained unclear. There had been casualties on both sides, but the Alpha King was holding the line. He is the strongest warrior in the realm, the old woman assured her. No enemy has ever bested him in combat, but Seraphine had seen the vision. The silver blade, Kaelin's body falling, and she could not shake the certainty that something was terribly wrong. Night fell, and still there was no word. Seraphine stood at her window, watching torches move in the distance like fireflies. Her wolf paced inside her, more agitated than it had ever been, desperate to break free. Please, she whispered to no one, please let him be safe. A knock at her door made her spin. Enter. But it was not Isolde who stepped through. It was not anyone from the castle at all. Hello, sister. Evangeline stood in the doorway, her golden hair cascading over shoulders draped in black silk. She looked exactly as she always had, beautiful, perfect, and untouchable. But there was something different in her amber eyes, something dark and ancient that made Seraphine's blood turn to ice. How did you get in here? Seraphine demanded, backing toward the window. The castle is guarded by wolves. Evangeline laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Wolves are so easily manipulated, sister. You of all people should know that. What do you want? What I have always wanted. Evangeline moved into the room with predatory grace, circling Seraphine like a shark scenting blood. Everything that should have been mine. The power, the position, the mate. Kaelin will never be yours. Perhaps not. Something flickered across Evangeline's perfect features. But then, I do not need him alive to claim what he possesses. Seraphine's heart stuttered. The attack at the border, that was you. A distraction. Clever little Omega. Evangeline's smile widened. The border attack serves its purpose. But the true prize is here, the Northern Realm seat of power. And you, me, I have nothing you want. You have everything I want. Evangeline's eyes flashed from amber to pitch black. You want to know a secret, sister? I am not just a wolf. I have never been just a wolf. The power I possess, the ability to manipulate, to control it, comes from somewhere much older, much darker. What are you? Seraphine breathed. I am the curse. Evangeline's voice dropped to something inhuman. I am what has hunted the Alpha bloodline for 300 years. I was placed in your family before you were born, waiting for this moment, waiting for the Moonsilver heir to finally appear so I could destroy her before the prophecy could be fulfilled. Seraphine's mind reeled. Not her sister. Never truly her sister. Some dark entity wearing Evangeline's face, plotting for decades, destroying every chance at happiness Seraphine had ever had. The males I stole from you. Evangeline continued, her voice a serpent's hiss. I did not want them. I simply could not allow you to bond, to grow strong, to discover what you truly are. Rage ignited in Seraphine's chest, a fury so profound it burned through everything else. Deep within her soul, something stirred, something that had been sleeping for 23 years. Her wolf. It rose not with a whimper, but with a roar that echoed through every fiber of her being. Power flooded her veins, silver and ancient and absolutely merciless. Her hands began to glow with pale light. What? For the first time, fear flickered across Evangeline's face. That is impossible. Your wolf is bound. Was bound, Seraphine growled, and her voice had changed deeper, resonant with power that was not entirely her own. But you made a mistake, sister. You made me feel rage, betrayal, the desire to protect what is mine. The light intensified, burning where their skin touched as Evangeline lunged for her throat. The creature shrieked and stumbled backward, smoke rising from her palms. This is not over, the creature wearing her sister's face snarled. The curse cannot be broken by one half-awakened Omega. Your precious Alpha King will still fall, and when he does, you will watch everything you love burn. Shadows gathered around Evangeline, swirling like a living cloak, and in an instant, she was gone. Seraphine collapsed against the wall, gasping, her hands still glowing faintly. The power that had surged through her was receding now, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But beneath the exhaustion was something else. Clarity. She knew now what she had to do. The vision had shown her Kaelin's death, but visions were not certainties. They were warnings, and she would be damned before she let that warning come true. Seraphine pushed herself to her feet and ran. The northern border was chaos. Seraphine had never run so fast in her life. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed. But she did not stop, could not stop. The bond that connected her to Kaelin pulsed with increasing urgency, a beacon guiding her through the darkness. She burst through the tree line to find a battlefield strewn with fallen wolves. Some were the black and silver of the northern realm. Others were strangers, their coats matted with blood and dirt. The sounds of combat still echoed from deeper in the forest snarls and howls, and the unmistakable clash of supernatural forces. Kaelin, she breathed, and the bond flared in response, pulling her forward. She found him in a clearing ringed by ancient oaks, locked in combat with 3 wolves that moved with unnatural coordination. His massive black form was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but his eyes still blazed with golden fury, and every snap of his jaws sent another enemy flying. But they were not trying to kill him. Seraphine realized with growing horror they were hurting him, driving him toward the edge of the clearing where a figure waited in the shadows. Evangeline, her sister the creature wearing her sister's face, stood with inhuman stillness, a blade gleaming in her hand, not steel. Silver, pure silver, deadly to any wolf, forged into a weapon designed to kill kings. Kaelin! Seraphine screamed his name, and his head snapped toward her voice. That moment of distraction was all the enemy wolves needed. They lunged as one, driving Kaelin to the ground, pinning him with their combined weight. He thrashed and snarled, but even the Alpha King could not fight 3 attackers and maintain his focus on the true threat. Evangeline stepped forward, raising the silver blade. How fitting, she purred, that his mate should witness the end. No! Power surged through Seraphine, the same power that had burned Evangeline in the castle chamber, but it was stronger now, fed by desperation and love and the primal need to protect her mate. Her mate, the word echoed through her mind with absolute certainty. Kaelin was hers, had always been hers, and she would die before she let him be taken from her. The change came without warning. Seraphine had never shifted before. Her wolf had been silent for so long that she had forgotten the sensation was even possible. But now, as rage and love and desperate power collided in her heart, her body erupted. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tore, and rebuilt themselves in new configurations. Fur the color of moonlight burst from her skin, a howl ripped from her throat that shook the trees themselves. When the transformation completed, she stood on 4 legs, her coat shimmering with silver light, her eyes blazing with moon-silver fire. Her wolf was massive, nearly as large as Kaelin's own form. The wolves pinning Kaelin froze, their instincts screaming at them to flee. Evangeline took a step backward, her black eyes widening. Impossible, the creature breathed. The binding should have held for another decade at least. Seraphine did not waste breath on words. She launched herself at the nearest enemy wolf, and her jaws closed around its throat with lethal precision. The creature dissolved into shadow. The second wolf met the same fate. The third tried to flee, but Kaelin was already free, and his vengeance was swift. Then they stood together, the Alpha King and his moonsilver mate, facing the darkness that had haunted both their bloodlines for centuries. Evangeline raised the silver blade. Prophecies can be broken, destinies can be rewritten. She moved with inhuman speed, the blade arcing toward Kaelin's heart. But Seraphine was faster. She threw herself between them, and the silver blade meant for her mate buried itself in her chest instead. The pain was beyond anything she had ever known. Silver burned through her veins like liquid fire. She collapsed, shifting back to human form as her body convulsed. No. Kaelin's anguished roar shattered the night. He shifted and caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. No. Seraphine, stay with me. Blood soaked through her ruined dress. The silver blade protruded from just below her heart, each beat pushing more poison through her system. How touching, Evangeline sneered, circling them. The Omega dies for her king, but ultimately meaningless. Without the moon's silver bloodline, the curse remains. Kaelin's golden eyes lifted to meet Evangeline's black gaze, and what Seraphine saw there made even her fading consciousness shiver. Rage, pure and absolute. You think I will let her die? His voice was barely human. You think I have waited 3 centuries only to lose her now? He bent his head to Seraphine's throat, to the place where her pulse fluttered weakly against her skin. Forgive me, my love, he whispered. But I will not let you go. And then his teeth pierced her flesh. The mating bite. Power exploded between them. A connection so profound it transcended the physical. Seraphine felt Kaelin's essence pour into her, his strength, his will, his absolute refusal to accept her death. It merged with her own power, the moon's silver light that had been awakening inside her, and together they became something greater than either could be alone. The silver poison began to recede. What? Evangeline stumbled backward. That is not possible. Should have killed a normal wolf, Seraphine rasped, her eyes fluttering open, blazing now with combined gold and silver. But I am not normal, and neither is he. She reached up and pulled the blade from her own chest, the wound already beginning to close. The silver that had been poison moments ago now flowed through her veins as power, transformed by the completed mate bond. Seraphine rose to her feet, supported by Kaelin's arm around her waist. Together, they faced the creature that had tormented them both for so long. The prophecy spoke of 2 bloodlines united, Kaelin said. The Alpha King and the Moon Silver Luna joined as one. Only together could they break the curse. And now we are joined, Seraphine finished, lifting the silver blade. In her hands, it glowed with pale light. Shall we see what a united curse-breaker can do? Evangeline's black eyes darted between them, genuine terror crossing that stolen face. I am ancient. I am eternal. I will return. No, Seraphine said simply. You will not. She threw the blade. It flew straight and true, guided by moon silver power and 3 centuries of accumulated vengeance. It struck Evangeline directly in the heart, and the creature screamed a sound that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. Shadows erupted from her form, writhing and twisting in their death throes. The beautiful facade crumbled, revealing something dark and shapeless beneath. And then, with a final wail of defeated fury, it dissolved into nothing. The curse was broken. Seraphine swayed, and Kaelin caught her immediately. He pulled her against his chest, his face buried in her hair, his body trembling with emotions held in check for 300 years. You foolish, brave, impossible woman, he breathed against her temple. You could have died. So could you, she whispered back, and I was not about to let that happen. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and she saw tears tracking down his face. My mate, he said, and the word held all the reverence of a prayer. My Luna, my heart. Seraphine reached up to touch his face. I love you, she said, and the words felt like coming home. I think I have loved you since you walked through that waterfall. Kaelin's answering smile was sunrise after an endless night. And I have loved you for 300 years, Seraphine. I simply did not know your face until now. He kissed her then, beneath the ancient oaks, surrounded by the aftermath of battle and the dawn of something new. 1 month later, the Northern Realm had never seen such a celebration. Thornhaven Castle blazed with 1,000 torches, their light reflecting off banners of black and silver that hung from every tower. Wolves had traveled from all 12 territories to witness what many had believed would never come to pass, the mating ceremony of their Alpha King and his Luna. Seraphine stood before the mirror in her chambers, hardly recognizing the woman who gazed back at her. Gone was the timid Omega, who had hidden behind waterfalls and believed herself worthless. In her place stood someone new, shoulders straight, chin lifted, silver eyes blazing with quiet power. The gown she wore had been crafted by the realm's finest seamstresses, moon silver silk that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Around her throat, she wore a single pendant of black stone set in silver, Kaelin's mating gift, containing a fragment of the moon whisper tree. You look like a queen, Isolde said softly from behind her. I feel like I am dreaming, Seraphine admitted. Part of me still expects to wake up behind that waterfall, alone and unwanted. That girl is gone. Isolde moved to stand beside her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. She served her purpose. She survived long enough to find her true destiny. But she is not who you are anymore. A knock at the door drew their attention. "My lady, it is time." The great hall had been transformed. Thousands of candles floated overhead, held aloft by magic older than the castle itself. Wolves in human form lined the walls, their eyes tracking Seraphine's progress down the central aisle with expressions of awe. But Seraphine saw none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the figure waiting at the far end of the hall. Kaelan stood before the ancient throne, dressed in ceremonial black that made his golden eyes burn like captured suns. When she reached him, he extended his hand, and she placed her fingers in his palm without hesitation. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "You have seen me covered in blood and dirt, half dead from silver poisoning," she whispered back. "And you were beautiful then too." The elder who would perform the ceremony stepped forward, his white hair falling past his waist. "We gather tonight to witness a union 300 years in the making." His voice carried effortlessly to every corner. The prophecy spoke of this moment. And now, at last, it comes to pass. He turned to Kaelan. "Alpha King Kalan Vos, do you claim this woman as your mate? Do you vow to protect her, to honor her, to stand beside her until your spirits return to the moon?" "I do." Kaelan's voice rang with absolute certainty. "I have claimed her in battle and in blood. I claim her now in love and in light. She is my mate, my Luna, my heart." The elder turned to Seraphine. "Seraphine of the moon-silver line, do you claim this man as your mate? Do you vow to stand beside him, to rule with him, to be his strength when he falters and his shelter when storms rage?" Seraphine looked into Kaelan's golden eyes, the same eyes that had found her, crying behind a waterfall, that had seen her worth when no one else had. "I do," she said, and her voice did not waver. "He found me when I was lost. He saw me when I was invisible. He loved me when I believed myself unlovable. I claim him as my mate, my alpha, my everything. Then, by the authority vested in me by the moon herself, I declare this bond sealed." Kaelan cradled her face in his hands with infinite tenderness, then tilted her head gently to the side and pressed his mouth to the mark he had already made. When his teeth sank in, renewing the bond, Seraphine gasped not in pain, but in overwhelming sensation. Their minds crashed together, and she felt his love vast and endless as the northern sky. When he finally lifted his head, the hall erupted in howls of celebration. Later, on the balcony overlooking the vast expanse of the northern realm, Kaelan turned her to face the horizon. Across the landscape, thousands of wolves had gathered, their voices lifted in a song that shook the foundations of the earth. "They are singing for you," Kaelan murmured. "For their Luna, the one who broke the curse, the one who saved their king." Tears streamed down Seraphine's face. "I do not deserve this. You deserve this and more." He cupped her face so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "You deserve to be loved, fiercely and completely. You deserve to stand in the light, instead of hiding in shadows." "Kaelan, for 300 years I existed. I ruled. I fought. But I was not truly alive. I was waiting for you without knowing your face or your name. And now that I have found you, I understand what all those centuries were for." "What were they for?" she asked softly. "To make me worthy of you." Seraphine kissed him then, pouring everything into the press of her lips against his. The bond between them sang with completion, with the absolute certainty that they had been made for each other. When they finally broke apart, Kaelan's eyes held a question. "Are you ready to rule beside me, my Luna?" Seraphine smiled full and bright, and utterly unafraid. "I survived 23 years believing I was worthless. I survived a curse designed to destroy me. I survived a silver blade to the heart." She traced the scar on his jaw. "I think I can handle whatever comes next." Together, they turned to face the howling wolves, the moonlit realm, the future that stretched before them bright with promise. She had started this journey as an Omega no one wanted, crying behind a waterfall because her sister had stolen yet another chance at happiness. She ended it as the Luna of the northern realm, mated to a king who would burn the world for her. And as the moon rose full and silver above them, Seraphine made a silent vow. She would never hide again. She would never believe herself unworthy again. She would stand in the light beside her mate, and together they would build something that would last for eternity, because that was what true mates did. They found each other against impossible odds. They fought for each other when all seemed lost, and they loved each other fiercely, completely, eternally until the stars themselves burned out. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you would like to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support truly means the world to me. Until next time, take care of yourselves And remember, your true mate might be just around the corner when you least expect it.